Welcome back to PM Ready, your guide to becoming PMP certified. This is part 2 of the lesson on scope management documents. Here's a very simple example of a work breakdown structure for a software development project. Let's suppose it's an educational system that needs to be developed. It has 3 main components of work in this project: the development of the software, the hardware, and then the project management. The software is further divided into its component parts, hardware as well, and of course, project management. Notice that at each level we have a numbering scheme in which each node in this tree diagram is coded with a hierarchical numbering system. Using this, you can see where each component and each node within this diagram falls. So as you reference one of these components in other documents or other communications, it's clear which component you're talking about and where it fits within the overall scope of work of the project. There's more than one way to organize a work breakdown structure. What you've seen so far is more based on the deliverables, but it could also be organized by the phases of your project. In this example, again a very simple example, you have a phase for design, a phase for development, and a phase for testing. And each of those phases has the various deliverables of that phase listed underneath that phase. Organizing your work breakdown structure by phase could be useful if you have some very long-lived phases in your project, or you have phases that are done by different organizations. Either way, organizing by phase is a valid way to put together a work breakdown structure. Now that you've seen a few simple visual examples, it's time for us to get into some of the details of what a WBS is and is not. We'll start with the structure of a work breakdown structure. It is a hierarchical decomposition of the total scope of work of the project, in which each level going down the tree represents an increasingly detailed definition of the project work. It can be represented as a tree diagram. However, for most projects, it won't really fit very well in a tree diagram, and so it's often captured as a hierarchical outline in a text-based document. In an agile approach, you may use epics, which further subdivide down into specific user stories. Also note that for the different sections of the work breakdown structure, you could have a different number of levels. Some deliverables or phases may need more levels of detail in order to adequately capture the breakdown of the scope. In addition, there may be some sections of your work breakdown structure that aren't really fully divided up and defined until later on in the project. This is what is known as rolling wave planning, when you intentionally leave some elements of the project undefined or not fully defined until later. The work breakdown structure needs to be complete, meaning that it represents all of the work that's specified in the currently approved project scope statement. The WBS represents all of the project and product work, including project management. It's important that a work breakdown structure follow what is known as the 100% rule. And that is simply that everything sums up properly from the child nodes to the parent nodes. The total of the lowest levels of this work breakdown structure need to add up completely into those nodes above it. So in other words, if you have a node that has several nodes under it, each of those nodes under it needs to completely 100% represent everything that needs to be done in order to get that item completed. A central attribute or core characteristic of a work breakdown structure is that it is deliverable oriented. This means that each component or node in the work breakdown structure represents a verifiable deliverable, that is, product, service, or result. As you saw in the previous example, it's okay and even desirable sometimes to go ahead and organize a work breakdown structure by phase, but the components within those phases need to be deliverable oriented. That means that these components are represented as nouns and not verbs. So take a look at your work breakdown structure. If you've got verbs in there, then it means you're focusing too much on the how and not on the what. The work breakdown structure needs to focus on the what, not the how. The how will come later. In particular, the work breakdown structure is not a schedule. It shouldn't include the activities needed to complete the work. The activities will come later. There are separate processes and separate project management deliverables for putting together the list of activities and the project schedule. The work breakdown structure is extremely valuable as it forms the framework for the planning and management of so much of the project. For example, scope. As you're managing scope and trying to control scope creep and changes to scope, this work breakdown structure will serve as your baseline of what is and isn't in the project. It's also the framework for your schedule. You'll use the work breakdown structure to identify the activities that need to be done to complete this work and to organize those activities into a schedule. This work breakdown structure will also be a framework for your cost planning and management and control. Also for your quality, for resource assignments, for procurement. There may be parts of this work that need to be outsourced, and so you'll use this information in your procurement management. Any changes to the project scope will reference this work breakdown structure, both in reviewing and approving these changes, as well as in managing the implementation of those changes. It also serves as a framework for helping to identify and manage risks on the project. Certainly it includes communications, because you'll be referencing these specific details, including these unique numbers for all of these different deliverables, in your project communications. And it will help with stakeholder engagement, not only with communications, but also because some of these deliverables will be more related to specific stakeholders that need to be involved or aware. Different sections of your work breakdown structure may have different numbers of levels, but at the very bottom level, what you have are what are called work packages. Now the question is, how do you know how far to go in decomposing the work breakdown structure into its lower levels and into work packages? The short answer is it depends. It depends a lot on the particular project that you're managing. The longer answer, however, is that you need to break this down to the point that it is useful for you to be able to sufficiently plan, manage, and control the project. It needs to be broken down enough that these work packages can be assigned to people or groups or organizations, and you can hold them accountable. Enough that you can properly manage and control and measure quality and risk on all of this project work. As you do this, make sure that you remain deliverable focused in your breakdown. If you find that you're reaching the point that you're starting to use activities and verbs that represent activities in your work breakdown structure, at that point you've gone a little too far. But don't worry, those activities do need to be done and will be defined later and connected into the work breakdown structure at a later point. Your work breakdown structure should contain what is known as a code of accounts. You will have noticed before that each element of the work breakdown structure has a unique identifier. It's particularly important that each work package and all of its parent nodes in this structure include this unique identifier so that it's easy to tell where each work package fits within the whole project scope and what deliverables it's part of. Whether your work breakdown structure is represented in a diagram or in a text document or whatever, you still need to make sure that your numbering system is not only unique but hierarchical in order to provide these benefits. Note, however, that the code of accounts is not a chart of accounts. A chart of accounts is a specific accounting term or tool that is used for financial statements. A work breakdown structure also includes what are known as control accounts. These are nodes in the tree, if you will, that are in the middle levels of the hierarchy. They're not at the work package level. They have to be at least one level higher than the work package level. That means that each work package is part of one and only one control account, and that each control account has at least two work packages as part of it. A control account is a control point within your hierarchy where the scope and the budget and schedule are integrated so that you can measure performance of the project using earned value analysis. In other words, you will want to know how well you're performing on your project, not just overall, but for specific portions of your project. And having these control accounts at certain points in your work breakdown structure will help you to appropriately organize the different sections and work packages into something that you can measure performance and report on performance. Now, we've just introduced 3 new terms that are very similar and very confusing. It's very easy to get these mixed up. So let's review them a little bit here and see if we can clarify. The code of accounts is that unique identifier that's hierarchical in nature. The control accounts are those points above the work package level where you're going to measure performance using earned value analysis. And the chart of accounts is that accounting tool used in financial statements. It may help you to remember the difference between these by thinking that the code of accounts is the code or number that's given to each element in the work breakdown structure. The control accounts help you to control the project by measuring performance. And finally, for the chart of accounts, focus on the word chart and think of it as being part of a report or statement, in this case, a financial statement. For code of accounts, focus on the word code. For control accounts, focus on control. And for chart of accounts, focus on chart. You can see in this diagram how the control accounts factor into the project budget. Right here in the middle of the diagram, you see the control accounts. To the right, it shows visually that control accounts consist of multiple work packages that roll up or sum up into the control accounts. By looking left, you can also see that all of the control accounts roll up or sum up to the entire cost baseline for the project. In other words, looking at this from the other point of view, the cost of the project is organized into control accounts, and all of the costs belong to a control account. There aren't any costs that aren't accounted for in a control account. The same, by the way, also goes for the schedule. All of the control accounts will include not only cost information, but schedule information that rolls up all of the schedule details of the various work packages that are in that control account. And all of that schedule information rolls up into the entire project schedule. Your work breakdown structure can also include what are known as planning packages. Your control accounts can include one or more planning packages each. The planning package is a component that is below the control account, but above the work package. So it's in between, in the middle, between the control accounts and the work packages. The difference here with the planning package is that it doesn't include detailed schedule activities. Without the schedule information, it doesn't really qualify as a control account because a control account is used to measure performance on cost and schedule. But it may still be useful for planning. And now we come to what is known as the WBS Dictionary. Now, all of the details about all of the deliverables and work packages are not found in your work breakdown structure. All of these items are represented there, but all of the details are found in the WBS Dictionary. Now, a lot of these details come from lots of other processes when you're doing scheduling and planning costs and quality and so on. But all of these details get added later on into the WBS Dictionary so that you have one place where all of the information you need about each work package is located. This includes, of course, your code of account ID for each item, for each work package. That allows you to connect everything in your WBS Dictionary to your WBS structure, your hierarchical structure. It will include a description of the work. All of your assumptions and constraints regarding each work package should be recorded here. Whoever is responsible for it should be here. Any related schedule milestones and schedule activities. The resources that are required for each work package. The cost estimates that you've generated. All of the requirements for quality that you've come up with. The acceptance criteria. All of this goes into your WBS Dictionary, as well as any technical references, agreement information that you have with others within the organization or with others outside the organization that you've brought onto the project through procurement, and any other information that is useful and important for managing the project and its work packages. The bottom line is that it's all in here. The scope baseline is one of your key baselines that's included in the project management plan that is baselined so that it can't be changed. It can't be changed without going through proper change and configuration management. The scope baseline includes the project scope statement, which you recall is the detailed description of the project scope. Also the WBS, which is the hierarchical representation of all of the project scope. And the WBS Dictionary that includes all of the details that come from all of the other processes. In this lesson, we've covered the Scope Management Plan, which includes all the rules for how you're going to manage the scope of the project. The Requirements Management Plan, which includes all of the rules for how requirements will be managed. This is also known as the Business Analysis Plan. The Requirements Documentation, which is where you record all of the requirements of the project that have been requested by the key stakeholders. The Requirements Traceability Matrix, which is used to connect each requirement to the business need, project objectives, and to trace these requirements through all of the features and deliverables of the project to make sure all of these requirements are accounted for and nothing is forgotten. The project scope statement, which is the detailed information about what the project will do, and which is not necessarily everything that's included in the requirements documentation. And finally, the scope baseline, which consists of the project scope statement, the work breakdown structure, which is your tree structure, your hierarchy, and your WBS Dictionary, which includes details that add to the WBS. This concludes part 2 of the lesson on scope management documents. For more information, you can refer to the PMBOK guide on these pages that include the Scope Management section, as well as the glossary and the terms that are found there regarding scope management and scope management documents. Also, the practice standard for work breakdown structures, which is published by and available from PMI. PM Ready is a publication of PM Guaranteed and is based on the Project Management Institute's PMBOK guide.